Right, joining us to go through the stories that are making the headlines today, former newspaper editor Don Neeson and journalist Benedict Spence. Very good, Spencer. Says it Spence or Spencer?
Spence.
Good, Spence, good man. OK, so let's do, that's another mistake. Let's get that done. Right, it's a day full of mistakes so far.
Oh, you can call me whatever you want.
Well, as a former
mind.
editor, you would be very precise on accuracy, wouldn't you?
Yeah, I tried to.
Yeah, yeah.
So let's start, Dawn, with this front page of the Telegraph, and it's the latest of what President Biden's been saying overnight, and concerns about what could, good and bad, happen today. So obviously there's this imminent ground invasion, but also hopes that in the next 20 minutes or so we may see the Rafah Gate opening, at least for foreign nationals in the Gaza Strip, among whom many Brits would benefit.
Yeah, no, absolutely. I mean, we're looking for positive shoots anywhere we can at the moment, aren't we? Every single front page of all the newspapers, with the exception of one, which I'm not going to mention, have various elements of this, the ongoing horror show that we're all facing. Joe Biden last night warned Israel against reoccupying Gaza, but promised the US would send everything it needs to fight Hamas. And this is the confusion here. The people are blurring the lines between the Palestinian civilians and Hamas. And we saw from the marches at the weekend some fairly horrific scenes there. In particular, I was shocked by the pro-Palestine marches, pro the civilians, helping them, but two women turned up with the images of the Hamas hang gliders.
Yeah, and the police are now seeking those two women, aren't they?
Yes, and I just thought that is quite clearly not supporting civilians, that is supporting the horrors that befell those poor people in Israel at the... You've spoken very
But yet, Benedict, we get Israel saying we don't deliberately target civilians on this, so don't worry. What reassurance would you take from that?
I mean, there's only so much that you can take from that because of the nature of how Gaza is built up and also because of the nature of how Hamas conducts itself. Everybody knows that it puts its military installations inside schools, inside hospitals. It puts them next to UN installations, specifically so that when Israel does retaliate, it can show the world, look how barbaric these people are. Look at the damage that they're doing. You know, there was the story that was doing the rounds about people trying to flee the north of Gaza a couple of days ago that were hit by an Israeli airstrike, and it turns out that they might not have been. It might have been Hamas booby trapped. Well, this is the point. This is the problem. It's that you've got two sides of the story, and both sides, frankly, you are inclined to think, well, there could be some truth in this because the Israelis have accidentally hit people in the past, but equally it is well known that Hamas keeps people in place to use as human shields, which is precisely why they took hostages in the first place. It's a barbaric form of warfare.
And it also just underlines, surely, how diplomacy has to be the solution in this, because you're not going to be able to resolve this without killing civilians, and there can be absolutely no justification. It is illegal to get involved. To involve civilians in all of this.
Isabel, I mean, you know, the two-state solution, diplomacy, world leaders sitting down and talking. The problem you keep coming back to here is Hamas don't want a solution. They want to wipe out Israel. And also their charter, the earlier version of it, said they want to wipe out all Jewish people. So there is no diplomatic solution to terrorism, that level of terrorism.
But it's trying to find some sort of democratic alternative to Hamas within Palestine.
Again, though, this is a problem. It is something that, you know, one does not want to be accused of victim blaming, but one does have to say, after this happens, and this will happen and it will be awful, the Palestinian people need to understand this is the fourth, fifth, sixth time that this has happened, where actually Palestinian or Arab coalition forces have targeted Israel, and they will end up losing, as they always do. And what happens then is they lose territory, and they say, well, we're not going to respect the new borders because we want our territory back. And the lesson that has to be taken is Germany, from the late 19th century to the middle of the 20th century. If you keep invading your neighbours and you keep losing, you lose Königsberg, you lose Danzig, you lose that land, and after a while, it has to be hammered home. There is no benefit to keep on invading a neighbour that you cannot hope to defeat. You will lose. That is the solution. You know, the Egyptians have learned this. They made peace with the Israelis because they understood, well, if you don't do that, you're not getting the Sinai back. The Jordanians have understood that. Why is it that the Palestinians are the only nation, the only group of people on the planet for whom we keep on saying, no, that's fine, you keep on having another go, and I'm sure it'll work out well next time.
Yes.
And I think it's important, Benedict, to highlight just how small Gaza is. It's something like 25 kilometres wide. It is so small that the Israelis could not invade with their full armed forces. They actually have to sift them if they do invade, and we think that's highly likely today. That they can just go bit by bit. They cannot just charge across that border.
And this is where the invasion is going to get pretty horrific, because, I mean, not to sort of just use the Second World War as an example, it's going to be a sort of a Stalingrad situation where actually it's too narrow for troops to move. So it's very easy for them to be targeted by small arms fire, by people with knives, by booby traps. The Israelis are going to suffer an awful lot of casualties. And of course, that is what Hamas wants, because they want public opinion at home in Israel to also turn to the government isn't conducting this war properly. Look at how many body bags are coming back. They want the Israeli population to turn around and say, is it worth actually going into Gaza and doing this? Be under no illusions, though, the Israelis are going to do this either way. And this is where, as you said, you know, there are going to be questions around international law about the bombing. This is why the Israelis do it, because they say it is not worth the danger to our soldiers not to level entire buildings.
But there's also the danger that if there is this land invasion, as has been threatened by Netanyahu, then Iran has warned that he will retaliate and get involved as well.
This is a scary situation.
And suddenly we have a much bigger escalation, which is why Antony Blinken, the US Secretary of State, has been in Egypt, not only trying to negotiate this crossing out through the Rafah crossing, but he's now flying into Israel today, because certainly the West is absolutely desperate to avoid seeing this spreading into a huge regional, if not global war. Who knows where it could all
Iran
end?
have already warned, haven't they, that fingers are on triggers, basically, and if Israel does go in, and by the way, the Gaza Strip is smaller than the Isle of Wight.
Yeah.
And yet, sort of like Israel are demanding that 1.1 million people leave the north of that country. That's like evacuating the whole of Glasgow.
What I would say very quickly about the subject of Iran and the possibility of Hezbollah is neither country, neither Iran nor Lebanon, can actually afford a war with Israel right now. The civilian populations are incredibly destitute. They're very unhappy. The militaries of both Hezbollah and the IRGC are very well funded, but that's partly why people in those countries are very unhappy. This is why you're seeing US carrier groups being moved to the region, because as powerful as the Iranian ground forces are, as powerful as Hezbollah are in terms of their artillery, they don't have an air force to speak, and they still do not have...
do very much supply, and
China is not going to go to war
Blinken has been
over
begging
this region.
Beijing to use its influence over Iran in all of this, and so they always have these kind of proxies and involvements of other nations, and so they may not have the funds themselves, but we know that China is involved, we know that Russia is involved, and then it suddenly becomes a much wider...
China would love for the US to get bogged down in the region, in a regional war, so that it can't divert attention to Taiwan. But if anything, actually, that makes the situation for Iran or Lebanon more dangerous, because it makes it more likely that the US will say to the Israelis, well, you already have the bomb and you already have a great air force. You do what you want. We're not going to stop you because we don't want to put troops on the ground, so you do you. The Iranians are close to having a bomb, but they don't have one yet. And that is what really makes them nervous. And it's probably why you've seen them hold off up to this point.
Let's talk about another war of sorts. Highly insignificant in comparison, but nonetheless gives a lot of people the heebie-jeebies, and that is bed bugs. Where have they popped up now in Britain?
They have popped up on the London Underground, and basically, I think someone, I don't know if we've actually got the footage, but someone has taken some film of the bed bugs on the tube seats. Yes, so and they are invading, but the thing is, bed bugs have been with us for a long time. They've been with us as long as we've been around.
They have been in the UK.
Yeah,
it's not like they've just arrived.
It's not like they've just arrived. The funnier part, that what makes this story so great for the tabloids, and let's face it, we all need some kind of distraction at the moment. There's not much else going on to distract from the horrors of Israel and Palestine. But the tabloids are having fun with it because they've come from France. Yeah, and that's the fun part. I mean, you know, the French and the Brits have always, you know, taken the mickey out of one another.
So do you think these are our bed bugs or French bed bugs?
They're invading French bugs, French bed bugs. They're the ones that in Paris have had there you go, you can see that footage now. And they're quite big, aren't they? You think they're quite small?
These ones are supposed to be bigger than native British bed bugs.
Right, so they're French and they're bigger.
Yeah, because they're French and they've had a large lunch, so they just appear.
Well, don't they fall asleep after? I'm sorry, it's being very Frenchish, isn't it? but I mean, you know, Paris has had this infestation, and people are literally throwing all their furniture out on the streets to get rid of them, because they're very hard to get rid of once you've got them.
Yeah.
But they
Apparently
never seen
spaniels are
one.
the solution, I was reading over the weekend.
What is?
Apparently cocker spaniels or a certain type of dog.
I think that's because they're very good at smelling them.
Because this is
I'm
what
not sure
happens.
about-
They start in the bed, but actually
Yeah.
they can be everywhere. So people who suffer with bed bugs, they have to have the entire room
Yeah, you have
dismantled,
to.
every single piece of furniture.
Yeah.
So you bring in these dogs that are highly trained and they can take you to all the infestations.
it's a bit drastic going-
it is
It's
hideous.
a bit gross.
It's a bit drastic going to get a cocker spaniel because you've got bed bugs, though, isn't it? I mean,
I don't
This
think
could be
it sounds very
fantastic.
drastic. I'd do whatever it takes.
This could be
frankly.
fantastic for the economy. It's going to boost the spaniel market, the furniture market, everything you could possibly want.
Where should we go? Should we turn our attention to winter fuel bills in all of this, Benedict? This is the Daily Mirror, page 15. 800,000 miss out on a heat bill clash. What's this story?
This is that there was £120 million of help, government help with energy bills last winter. Everybody remembers why, of course, because of Russia's invasion of Ukraine. There was the big fear about spiking energy bills. So there was a £150 annual warm home discount, and that's supposed to be for the poorest people in society. But as the Mirror points out, that doesn't affect an awful lot of people who sort of just miss out on the threshold.
Okay.
And it doesn't take into account the fact that it's
But
not gone
Benedict,
up
we've got to leave that story